You don't say much, but you have an unquiet mind.
Hey folks, thanks for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. Settle down easy on my big orange couch with your coffee, tea, soda, or adult libation. Today's show is going to be pretty interesting with Baz and I. We're going to talk a little bit about two issues today. Our funniest or best survival situation. And after that, we're going to get into the 9mm 45 debate, 45 caliber debate, which is always fun. And it's always so humorous. Especially when you start talking about stopping power. Oh my God. Yeah, no, whatever. It is what it is. But with that being said, Baz, why don't you jump in right now and start telling your story first, brother. And I'm glad you're back here in the new year, and it's been a while since we've had an actual show.
Yeah, it is, brother. It is. Thanks for getting me back on. Yeah, just a change of profession, massive change in lifestyle, and personal bullshit, obviously. So it's been a while since I've been on. A lot of changes. But I hope everybody's had a good new year. I know you've had a good new year, brother. We've spoken many times about it. And like I say, it's good to be back on your big orange couch with that adult libation in hand. Yeah, so we're going to do sort of like a series of shows where we touch on sort of things we might have touched on before, but we can go more in depth, but share a lot more sort of stories from the community and stuff like that, on things like survival and preparation and just the everyday stuff that you go through, as somebody like-minded and someone who's prepared for a situation out of the norm, basically. And we sort of thought, well, why don't we start this by mentioning there's the times or the situations we've been in where we've had to sort of apply these sort of like means of working, systems of working, our skill set and things like that. And I think what it is, it's for the most, you don't see a situation beginning to develop before it's too late. Basically, it can be a weather system, it can be a fire, it can be an armed sort of situation where you're in a bank or you somewhere where there's an armed assailant. You can be just out socialising with friends and family and something might happen. And, you can be that person there who's got the right person at the right time with the right skill set or the right equipment, if you know what I mean. And that right equipment could be anything from a pocket knife to a belt to a firearm to just what you've got in your head, So I think what we'd say we do is we'll share a couple of experiences first, and then we can go start breaking it down and things like the lessons learned.
Sounds great to me. Honestly, yeah. I've always been a proponent of the right man at the right time at the right place can, will, and always does make the difference. And for the doubters out there, which we know we have many, which probably have already given me several dislikes without even listening, and that's okay because we know where and who you're from. So it's just an accepted thing, and it doesn't bother us. We laugh about it, actually, because it shows we don't play in your penis measuring contest because you can't participate. Go on, brother.
Yeah, so it's a good place to start, and even though it might have been decades after it's happened, you can still talk to people and they go, "Why did you do this? Why didn't you do this?" and shed a new light on it or give you a new idea. You know what I mean? That critiquing, the self-critiquing, and then the critiquing from others, where if you accept criticism from others and you accept it gracefully, you can learn 1,000 times more than you can from yourself, if you know what I mean. So I think one that's to me was when I was actually in the army. When I was a young NCO, we were out in Canada. I had a big training area out in Canada called Bathurst, British Army Training, Suffolk, and this training area, it's fucking huge. You know what I mean? It's like on the scale of like training area out in the US, absolutely huge areas where you can't actually make it from one side to the other without transport. You know what I mean? Supply, food, water, and all that good stuff. So there was a small element of my platoon. We were tasked with a reconnaissance job. So that was the job I was doing at the time. And basically, we'd gone out there. One of the guys who was tasked with bringing black jerry cans basically had not done his job properly. And again, it was all lessons learned. And he picked up a jerry can that had actually a hairline fracture in it. So I've been walking around. Just so happens he was tailing Charlie, so no one could see all this water pissing out of his Bergen, his rucksack.
Right.
We had to actually stop 2 or 3 hours into this march and actually took our rucks off, sat down, and he was like, "Why is this sloshing around? Like, why haven't you heard it?" And he's like, because he was a newer guy, he just didn't want to say anything in case, Again, lessons learned. Anyway, so it was like, okay, for X amount of time, we need water. So the patrol commander, my platoon sergeant, or was my platoon commander at the time, who was actually leading up this element, said, "Right, Baz, what I want you to do is there is actually a collection of vehicles not far from here. I want you to go down there, swap out this jerry can, and make your way back to this RV point." Okay, then, so not a problem. At that time, we hadn't been issued our maps. So because I'm quite good with navigation, I said, okay, not a drama. I'll just make my way back. We'll have it at some point on the trail. So to cut a long story short, I chose the young lad to come with me. It's his fuck up. He can carry the water jerry can there and back. And we left to go and get these vehicles. Now, these vehicles had actually moved. I could see them in the distance, but again, because it's the open prairie, what looks 3 or 4 miles away is actually 10, 15 miles away. It happened to be about 7 or 8 miles away. So we made our way there and we got this jerry can. Now, because it was further away than anticipated, light was getting short, night was falling. So it was like, right, we've got no map. These guys had then obviously packed the vehicles and fucked off because they had to go and meet another company 20 or 30 kilometres away to the north or east or wherever it was. And obviously we had to get back to our element.
Right.
But without a map. And obviously this is the days before GPS, or handheld GPS. Then all of a sudden it was a situation where we're stuck in the middle of a prairie, which is actually a live fire zone. Obviously there's artillery fire and all that good stuff. I don't have a map. And I don't have a grid where we're going. I don't have anything. I just know that we need to travel north back up to where we need to be. So it got to the point where it was like, okay, it wasn't dark enough for the stars, and it wasn't light enough to actually fucking see where we're going accurately because of the way the prairie is. It's just open ground,
right,
grassland and stuff like that. Cut a long story short, I had to wait till the stars obviously came out, and then I had to navigate by the stars. And I remember because I was in the northern hemisphere, so it's just okay. All I need to do is just find the North Star and then march on that bearing. And that's how we did it. Then we got a track after about 4 or 5 hours, and then just cut a right on this track and got up there. And I think it was about 12, 13 hours before we actually got back to our element. And like, where the fuck have you been? And I just looked at the boss. The boss knew that he'd fucked up because he'd not given me a map or anything like that. And he just went, okay, guys, just fall back in and there. I mean, obviously we were okay because we had water, because we had a jerry can full of it. But it was just one of them elements where it was like, okay, we're stuck in the middle of nowhere. You know what I mean? It's a shifting template of the exercise. We can have artillery rounds landing in our position at any time because it's a live fire zone. And I just remembered, from years and years ago when I was a Boy Scout, how to read the stars for navigation, if you know what I mean.
I do.
So that's one of the times where it's just like, like digging things out from your psyche that you've done years ago, how to do this, how to do that. And then it was sort of then that lesson there. Well, not so lesson for the boss to give me a fucking map or give you guys a map, making sure that he has proper mapping for his people. But the importance of kit checks and all good stuff like that, which might have been a failing of me, might have been a failing of the boss, might have been a failing of that young soldier. But at the end of the day, it was okay, navigation, you cannot rely on having a map and a compass and GPS and all that fucking stuff. So you need to go by biology, by physics, by nature. The stars don't lie unless you're on the opposite hemisphere, if you know what I mean. So that's certainly was a lesson I took away from there, where it was, I need to brush up on these navigational skills and not rely on what I'm given. Is what's provided to me by the environment around me, and I certainly made sure that my guys were doing that as well. And it's something I've always taught right up until I left the army. Don't rely on this. Always make sure you know what you're doing if you've got nothing in your hand, and it paid off multiple times, especially in places like Afghanistan and things like that, where GPSs and maps aren't exactly accurate, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Have you come across anything like that?
Oh yeah, I do. I found a Afghan map that I had a while back. Now it's on point. It's one of the maps made by the U.S. But the big thing a lot of people don't think about it, even if you have a compass, you need to know your declination, your magnetic declination. And you in Canada, depending on how high up you are, your declination would be way different than where it is. Let's say if I'm at Camp Pendleton, which is in the Pacific, or if I was down there in Kings Bay, Georgia, on the Atlantic. Massive difference. And that's just the reality of the situation. But everybody's got to be briefed on that. Plus, luckily, you had the tracking skills, which your outfit had given you, through schooling, and it made it a little bit more easy to backtrace. You didn't have to do any kind of compass thing, except for backtrace once you got on your own path. The only buggery I think that I would see there would be when you jumped into a vehicle and then had to guess by time, what we call a WAG, a wild ass guess, by time of foot march, where they would be. You'd get in the general area from time and how fast your unit moves. You'd get pretty close, but it depends on whether they got noise, light discipline, what they're doing. And so that's not as easy a task as most people who are listening might think. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it certainly is. Again, if I had have had a compass, it might have been a bit easier because I could have marched on a bearing. You know what I mean? I could have gone, okay, we've come at this bearing, so we just need to reverse that bearing 180 and march back on that one and get back onto our track and then find our element that way. But I think because we didn't realise it was such an issue until a good 4 or 5 miles into the journey there. You know what I mean? That, okay, they're the way than anticipated, just because of the heat shimmer and all that good stuff. Again, you've seen it in the Gulf and stuff like that, mate, where you can see something in the distance and it only looks a couple of miles away when it's actually, in fact, tens of miles away.
Exactly.
So again, and that comes into account, and then it's just. All I remember is when we were given sort of the brief, or this is where we're going to go, there was sort of 3 high spots. You know what I mean? 3 sort of like 3 high features that we were going to be working around. And then I saw these in the distance and I went, okay, now we've got a topographical feature that we fucking fix on and march towards, because anything, like you say, the desert or the prairie, there is no topographical fucking features if it's just flat. You know what I mean? But once you've got eyes on sort of a geological feature, I remember, okay, that was to the west or to the north or to the south of where we were operating, so I marching that bearing and then getting guidance from there. And as we were marching, obviously these 3 mountains in the distance are quite sort of noticeable against the night sky, and then it was just get there and then work our way from there, which happened to pay off again because of navigational skills and tracking skills and stuff like that, watching for boot prints in the dust and things. we're abiding by sort of exercise rules as well. We're still trying to be fully tactical, even though it's a non-combat situation, because at the end of the day, we've still got a job to do. And rather, I'd fix the situation myself than alert to others to a fuck up, if you know what I mean. And it's one of them things that we've always said. It's own your mistakes. You know, I own the mistake. If I have to fucking walk another 6 miles and people don't know about it, then that's what I'm going to do, because I'm not going to make myself look a cunt, the team look a cunt, the battalion look a cunt, yada, yada. You know what I mean? Because it's all about reputation at the end of the day. Obviously, if things get to a certain situation where you think this is actually a dire situation, we've got no water, it's now 45 degrees fucking heat, we've got no shelter, no nothing, I haven't a clue where I am, that's when you need to start thinking about, we need to raise the alarm. But it didn't get that far. You know, that's just one sort of small lesson I learned, is just to work on the skills that you think don't really matter in the big picture. And I think I think that's why I chose that story, because it's a good starting point. There's been other times where it's been a bit more dire. The situation's been a bit more serious, both in sort of the exercise world and on operations as well. But I picked that story because it's a starting point, if you know what I mean, for a basic skill, to take that skill and then move further. And that's hopefully where these shows are going to go.
Oh,
Your
exactly.
thoughts?
Exactly. That's why I'm a big proponent. If carry your sewing kit, and one of those needles should be magnetized, and it's easy to do. You know, electromagnetize it, and it'll hold that magnetization. Float it in something. You have a basic compass. If it's during the daytime, learn how to use a daggone stick in the ground, your watch, and figure out which direction it is by time and sun, as a sundial, basically.
Yeah.
You know, just basic shit that a lot of people don't cover. Same with knots. Learn your knots. Know how to tie a good knot. If you have to improvise a sleeping shelter, you don't want it to collapse on you during the evening. Your basha, whatever you're putting up. But it's very illustrative. And I thank you for adding that. And anything else you want to add, please feel free, brother, because my story is pretty quick.
Yeah, I think each person has their sort of strengths and weaknesses. And when I was telling the guys, certainly when we were doing sort of like SEER and stuff like that, it's like, okay, there's basic you need to learn. Everybody's got like the general gist of combat survival or survival in general. I said, but you need to know how to make a fire. And that's without matching. I like to just learn how to make a fire. Don't care how you fucking make it, whether you make a fireball, a fire drill, whether you sit rubbing two sticks together for fucking 7 hours. Not bothered, as long as you can make a fire and know the principles of fire and all that stuff. So you're going to be pretty successful in doing that. Once you've got a fire, you've got heat, you've got safety, you've got light, you've got that. As soon as you get a fire going, you already mental well-being is already improving, because it goes back to that primitive DNA, that primitive soul, where fire kept us safe from saber-toothed tiger and the elk at the mouth of the cave. So once you get a fire going, straight away, I would dare say it's one of the first things I used to do, certainly in the survival situation, was get a fire going, because it's not there is that mental well-being, but it's also got other uses. You know, let's say you haven't got a knife, so you need to make a weapon. Okay, so you burn the end of a long stick, and then you sharpen that charcoal burnt end down, because it's a lot harder than just a stick that you've snapped off a tree or a branch or something like that. So it's got physical use as well. And again, while it's burning, you can get on with doing other tasks, building shelter, looking for water, whatever you need to do. So building a fire, for me, sort of like the pinnacle of, you're in a situation, this is what you need to do. You know what I mean? Rather do it now than later. It might start fucking pissing down, you know what I mean, torrential rain in 15 minutes, where there's no way you're going to get a fire started. But if you've got a fire started now and you're keeping it fed, the chances are you've got a lot better success at keeping warm and dry. And then the next thing is think about shelter and think about water. No, the bare essentials: heat, shelter, water, and then additionally to that, then you need to think about sustenance, food, and all stuff like that. But that is a longer journey. It goes into the realms of, if you're unlucky enough to be stuck somewhere that you're not familiar with, it goes into things like the old familiarization of plants and root vegetables and things like that. Okay, I don't know what this is, so then you have to break it down into breaking a piece off, rubbing it on your lips and leaving it for half an hour, see if the lips are tingling or there's any change in the way your lips are feeling or looking. And then rubbing a bit on your tongue, again, waiting that half an hour. What's it taste like? Is it acrid? Is it bitter? Does it burn or anything like that? And then consuming a small piece and waiting a good another 6 hours to see if there's any adverse sort of reaction to it. And then eating a finger size of it. And then after 12 hours, okay, I've consumed this 12 hours later. This is now safe to eat. And then you've got carbohydrates, which are energy, and things like that. But the main ones are shelter and water. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, that's the main giddy up on that. The only thing I'll say, the other benefit from water is the charcoal. Remember the old E&E adage: if you're tight, eat the white. If you're slack, eat the black. What that means is the white ash. If you're slack, keep it black, means eat the black charcoal from the wood. You let it cool, of course. Don't be an idiot. But that's what you want to do. If you're not going at the rate you need to excrete the poisons that the body makes every day. So if it's tight, you eat the white. It'll make it a little looser. That's just a little adage that we had. So I loved how you brought up the fire, because fire has many uses, including the ashes to help basically, depending on how you set up that 3-ring, to finalize purification of water until you boil it. If you're, draining water from a lake or some sort of pond that you're sketchy about, big rocks, little rocks, this, that, and the final thing is usually charcoal. And still boil it for at least 5 minutes. But depending on height, altitude, it may take longer, it may take less. Anyways, but that's a general rule. If you don't have any Aquamira or not hexamine, Jesus Christ, I almost said hexamine tablets. Just the tablets that you get in your water purification kit. But yeah, no, you've hit on all that. I do want you to touch on the one thing, and then I'll jump into my quick one, because mine's super quick. I had similar experience, but of course it didn't work out the way yours did when I was going through a foreign commando course. And I'm not getting into it here, but it was during my Army days when I was a young dude, and I actually got the ability to go to this commando course, and I loved it. And but it was hell, because European militaries do their courses a little different. And this one, actually, you build a raft out of a truck tarp and some wood, and you go down the little river. Rivers in Europe are not like what we think in the U.S. They're not as wide and fast-flowing for the most part. And you know this. But the funny thing is it was wintertime after the first part of it, and it really iced up quickly. And those assholes in the course cut the ice in squares, and they're thick. So it's not cutting you. But it's a lot of ego training too, where we had to get in the water. Of course, they had a line that you hold on to as you went through it. And it felt like you were getting cut every time you went by an ice chunk. And you weren't, because it was thick enough that it's not like a razor blade, but it felt like it on your skin. And you had an incident where you got diced with some water, on one of your courses and explain to these people exactly how you and your, I believe, Dutch compadre dealt with that and the easy little survival cheat code you used.
Yeah. So again, it was on the Lerp School in Bavaria, place called Bad Wintergarten or Wintergarten. It was actually called. It's actually moved. I think it had moved not so long after. A place called Fullendorf, and it was a long range reconnaissance patrol school. At the time, it was headed up by the SAS, even though it was a German school, but it was headed up by an SAS colonel, and then it had a multitude of instructors from all over the world, from Germany, from Britain, from Canada, the US, and they did a multitude of courses there. And one of the courses we went through was the combat survival, the LERPS combat survival course, where, again, you taught the relevant skills to survive in sub-zero conditions, or because if you think it's Bavaria, I went through it in the winter, and then there's like a SEER phase, obviously the escape and evasion, and then obviously at the end of the course you're captured and you've got to do sort of your resistance interrogation and all things like that. Again, not to go into it too much, the sort of pre escape and evasion phase, you get the opportunity to sort of like, okay, as if you're in a POW, you can scrap some material and things like that to make slapdash fucking gloves or socks or hats or whatever. And you're also not paired up with someone from your own country. Okay, so you're automatically on the back foot.
Setting with. Right, I get
and it
that.
was a Danish frogman that I was paired with. And he spoke very little English. But it was a really, really, obviously, the Danish frogmen are their version of the Naval Special Warfare guys. I just remember this unassuming dude, really quiet, really calculating. He was the only Danish dude there, and he was just stood at the back while everybody else was doing what they were doing. And the instructors brought this big fucking sort of like, it was like a poncho, but the German version of a poncho, just without the hood, a bit like the British version. And they chucked it on the floor, and then they said, everything there, guys, is for you to use. Now, we were going out that night on for a few drinks with some of our fucking colonial brothers from your side of the pond. So it was basically, look, the longer I spend now fucking about is the less time I'll get to spend in a Bavarian bar drinking from fucking tankards and eyeing up busty women. So being a young lad, it was just like, yeah, I'm going to make some gloves, big fucking stitches like a 4-year-old monkey would do. Yep, done. And off we fucked. This Danish frogman stood back, waited for obviously the fucking carnage of everybody rustling through all these scraps of material. He just walked up, flipped it all off the floor, and took the poncho. Obviously, no one had realised that, okay, this poncho is fair game. He turned around to one of the instructors, and they just sort of like raised an eyebrow and gave him a fucking smile and a nod, saying, "Yeah, you fucking spotted it, mate. It's yours." He took it away, and what he did, he stitched stones into each of the 4 corners, so it was weighted, so he could put it around his body. Now, obviously, before the SEER phase, your strip search, you have to do squats so they can't see that you're hiding tins of beans up your arsehole and things like that.
Right.
And they check all your kit. Well, what he'd done, in the lining of the poncho, he'd left a needle and thread. So when they came round and they went, okay, what's this? They had a look at his poncho and they unpicked one of them. So yes, it's just stones. They gave him it back. What he did then, when they were going round and going through everybody else's kit and things like that, he unpicked them and stitched tea lights. The little candles, little round candles.
Oh yeah, tea lights are awesome.
Tea lights.
Yep.
He stitched a couple of them into each, into the corners. So he had like 2 or 3 tea lights. And that was it. Anyway, we were out in the Bavarian Mountain, obviously, because we were only moving at night, because we were doing CTRs and RVs and things like that. And there was an area that we had to cross, and obviously it was about beginning of February, end of January, beginning of February time, a bit of glacial melt. So you can imagine in Bavaria how cold it is at night. Okay, there's snow everywhere, yada yada yada.
Oh, I can more than imagine, brother.
and and the kit we're wearing is like the old POW kits with woolen trousers, the old woolen jacket, and like the old like fucking leather hobnail boot type of deals that
At
used
least it
like
was
the
at least it was wool, brother. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. So like the old hobnail boots that the British Army used to wear in the 50s, and that's where we're wearing it anyway. So we're crossing this river, and I slip on a rock, and I'm submerged. I managed to crawl back out, but at this point, I am fucking soaked to the skin from head to toe. Anyway, so this is quite critical now. I am now fucking soaked. It's like minus fucking 12 or something like that. We need to get into cover. So what we did, we found
12
um,
Celsius for the folks that are Americans. So you do the difference from 12 Celsius to Fahrenheit. Okay?
yeah. So it's like for us, freezing point of water is 0 degrees. You know what I mean? So it's like minus 12, so it's 12 degrees colder than freezing point of water. Um,
Right.
anyway, so we find this fir tree, and obviously one of the skills that was shown is a fir tree underneath will be bare ground. You know what I mean? Because the snow's got there because of the fir tree. So we burrowed down through the snow under this fir tree. It's all dry pine needles, so it's a good place to be. So we get there and we poke a few holes in, obviously because of carbon dioxide. You don't want to stuff. I'm sat there shitting like a shitting dog. Anyway, this Danish frogman dude, he just sort of like takes off his boot, puts the poncho over himself, picks the corners and get these tea lights out, and he disappears under his poncho. 15 minutes later, he puts the poncho back. There's steam everywhere, and he's warm, dry, with a big fucking smile on his face. So he sort of beckons me over. Oh, you're Baz, you come under. And he sticks me under this poncho. He takes my boots off. Now I've had a conversation on this not so long ago, and I'll go into the reasons anyway in a minute. Put the tea lights inside the boot, like down into the heel of the boot, if you know what I mean. So it's not in that down near the toes; it's just the heel of the boot, and then
Right.
puts the poncho over the top of me, and then obviously the heat drying out the boot. It's making me warm, which is obviously raising my body core temperature, stopping me going hypothermic, and then it's drying up at the same time. And obviously, if again because of the leather boots, and these boots weren't my boots, and it was a survival situation, I wasn't cared about if the boots got scorched or something like that. So the heat from the candle, it was purely because it was a survival situation. At that point, up until that point, it was sort of, okay, these is exercise rules, but we're being tested. After that point, it was sort of like life or death. It's hypothermia and all that good stuff, frostbite and all that stuff. So threw back the thing after I think it was about 20 minutes, half an hour, and I was pretty dry, you know, and I was in a lot better place, and we were able to carry on and sort of like meet our objective. And again, from that moment on, everywhere I've gone, no matter whether I'm in the Arctic Circle, whether I'm in on the equator down in Kenya, whether I'm in the jungles of Borneo, whether I'm in Afghanistan or wherever, I've always taken 4 or 5 tea lights with me in my belt kit, because again, it's just one of those things that I learned hard lesson that the smallest of things save a life, you know. So that's again that one of the times where somebody else's lessons have given me a lesson for life, you know. Again, which is important, because if you
Oh
can't
yeah.
learn off other people, then you're not gonna learn much at all.
I agree wholeheartedly. Sorry about that. For some reason, my mouse is not clicking right tonight. The only thing I have that, I mean, I have a couple of them, but one was on Adak, Alaska, but I don't want to really get into that one. You've covered cold weather pretty good. This is my first lesson, and it was shortly after a Marine at 29 Palms died. They give us all these little green cards on desert survival. And like you said earlier, um, what you think is maybe 2, 3 miles away might be 15, 20 miles away in the desert, you know, just like at a prairie. If I'm wrong, you correct me, but it's correct.
Yeah,
The point is, Um, I've got the picture holding up right now. This was when I went out there and I had a couple of ponchos. As a Marine, that's what we do. And a couple of poncho liners. And I got told, well, you're going to be on TCP for 5 days. And I'm like, okay. They gave me a 5-gallon jug. My jug was not leaking, so it's not that kind of drama. They gave me MREs. And they said, we'll pick you up at the end of the op. And I'm like, cool, no problem. And it was out at Camp Wilson, 29 Palms. And here I was doing a traffic control point, as a military policeman. Funny thing is, everybody's driving by and you'll see a fence in the background. That fence was actually a bombing area. And during that time, there was some fun stuff that happened night and day. I was there 5 days. Never felt I had 5 days, 5 gallons of water. They say a gallon of water a day out in the desert. That's very correct, especially during that time. So it was very hot. So it was midsummer. It was CAX 8, 9, and 10, if I remember right. So we're out there on that CAX is a combined arms operation exercise. Anyways, so I'm out there chilling. Everything's going on. Directing traffic where they need to go. It was a central point. When I got there, first thing I was doing was finding rocks and started building within this little sign, because that's the way the wind was blowing, and I believe the Santa Anas were blowing that day. And I started building like this rock boniface. But what you don't see is the completed one, because that was the only picture I could take. That was the last one of my 35 millimeter roll, and it was taken by Boudreaux, who's now dead. He died in a motorcycle accident. Only a few months back now, if I remember right, 6 months. So fair winds and following seas, Boudreaux. Sorry you're gone. The point is, I also had my E-tool with me. I dug a trench that I could lay in. I also, when they came back, I made that thing whole. I had a fire. I found different things I could burn. Not going to talk about certain things, but I burned a lot of things that most people would be like, you can't burn that, it'll go boom. And I'm like, only if I hit it with a hammer, baby. That's all I'll say on that. But it was a good time. It was time out of mind, but it was about knowledge more than anything. And on the fifth day, here's what happened. The last convoy, and I knew it was the last convoy, my radio, by the way, was non-existent. They just didn't stop out and see me. I think they forgot about me. Or they just didn't give a fuck and said, well, he's got enough water and enough food. I'll be alive. I wasn't going to leave there. We'd already had one Marine earlier, like, we're talking months, like 2 or 3 months before, who, for some reason, didn't have water, this, that, and the other. And he tried to walk back to Camp Wilson from pretty close to where I was at. And that was why it was such a big deal. And it did. At night, those lights, it's like 2 miles away. You're like, damn, man, I can walk there. I can go into Camp Wilson, grab some beers, drink them, and walk right back. You can't. That's fact. And so the funniest part is, last convoy going through, and I knew it would be the last convoy. I was given times, and of course I had a watch. And the last time, I also had a compass. I always carry a compass, even if it's a Suanto. I always have a compass. It just is what I do. And I was like, oh, they'll come pick me up. I think it was after midnight. And I think I had 2 of my canteens out of the 4 I carried full of water. And I was like, well, I might be out here next day. Who cares? You know, I was out of MREs at that point. And I didn't really care about that either. Because I got all the good MREs and already ate them. And I had some leftover bits and pieces. And I already had a cat hole developed. I mean, dude, I had this thing wired tight. And the NCOIC of it comes out there in the Hummer and he goes, what the fuck up? And I'm like, what? What's he talking about? He goes, it looks like you made a home here. And of course, since I made square knots and different easy untying knots, it took me about probably 5 minutes to unass that site. The only thing left were the rocks. And what you see is the beginning of it. That actually was a nice little place for whoever came after me. They had a nice little spot where they could chill out if something happened and do the same thing I did. And that's kind of the thing too. If you're going to a repetitive place where people keep going, try to make it better for the next man or woman. Yeah. And I guess that's the end of my story, because on that one there's no drama. I don't want to put the other drama ones in, but that was a quick story on what you can do and how you can do it. And you'll see on that picture when this post, you know, what it is. Now I'm going to do a quick little rap interlude until we go into the next thing. Of course, everybody always likes to accuse me of talking about war porn. And I came across this jam from Everlast. And I don't care. We're not going to talk about it. If they want to take it away, it'll just condense this podcast by all your complaints that you will make, because that's the kind of cunt you are. But I really don't care. And it's war porn industry with you accuse me of war porn. I don't push that out, and neither does Baz. And it makes me laugh every time you say that, because I just tell the truth, and I'm not going to stop. And this is Everlast part of it.
Technical weaponry, rhyme style heavenly. Learn my pedigree, burn my effigy, spit my therapy, smoke my remedy, passive aggressively, stroke my enemy, invoke my revelry, provoke my devilry, bucket list trilogy, war porn industry, terminate, assassinate with extreme bigotry, heavyweight armor plate, subatomic energy, necronomicon, triple hexagon, one level beyond, the devil's word is bomb, put murder on a song and a murder in your palm, third grade death toll, underwater death roll, crocodile tearing, devil loving, God fearing, bioengineering, stem cell cloning, Malay with the boning, international zoning, 7 samurai all die by one Ronin.
All right, so we are back, and with that being said, Baz, let's jump into this big BitChute silliness of the 45 9mm debate, revolver versus semi-auto debate, because it's hilarious and it keeps coming up, and it will keep coming up, in my opinion. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's not a debate that we've only had. It's a debate that flies around in our circles on social media. It's just one of those arguments where it's never gonna. It's like the old Ford and Chevy argument. What's and it's never going to be settled. It's never going to be settled. There's advocates for both sides. There's advocates for 9mm, 45,
or the Land Rover, Land Cruiser, Hummer debate. I mean, it's that retarded. and it's about shot placement. Go on and talk about the thread. The participants aren't here. I want to bring them on as soon as possible and give them a fair hearing. It's not retarded because of any of their points of view. The retardation comes from all of a sudden you're saying this is better. Look, there's a guy, Jerry Michalak. The guy's a phenom with a revolver. He's trained with it forever. And there's a lot of people that have done that. And they go up against semi-auto guys. They've got their speed strips. They've got their daggone speed loaders for the revolvers. And they can load just as fast but they only have 6 shots every load. And it doesn't make me think less of them. These guys win in IPSC competitions. You've seen some awesome revolver users. So, yeah. I'm not negating them. I'm saying I like a revolver because actually in those 6 cylinders, you can put snake shot. You can put a couple hollow points in case there's a baddie. And you can take down some critters that you can't take down without a 10 millimeter and above. And not have a jam if you fall off a horse. And that's something I was told by my Opa, my grandfather. And every time you get on a horse, never forget, it has its own mind. And if it throws you and you're still in the stirrups, it will drag you to death. And I've always carried a revolver. Every time I'm riding a horse, no matter where it's been. And your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, it just comes down to that tool, that what if tool, doesn't it? And without a shadow of a doubt, that there's no argument in the old revolver versus semi-auto when it comes to functionality and reliability. As in, a revolver is very less prone to malfunction. You know what I mean? Without smashing it with a hammer or it being submerged in sand or something like that, but just through the actual mechanics of the actual machines, the tools, there's a lot less working parts. There's a lot less going on with a revolver than there is with a semi-auto. So more moving parts equals more chances for a misfeed or a jam or just a malfunction, So that argument is pretty settled whether you're a semi-auto dude or whether you're a revolver dude or whether you sit on the fence on both. You know what I mean? You're happy to use both, whatever's given, whether you carry both, whether you carry one or the other. But there is no real argument there that people can say, yeah, but with the Glock, it's jam-proof, and yet it's not. Let's be honest. Some people might get a Glock 19 Gen 3, put 10,000 rounds through it and never have an issue. Somebody might get it and put 10 rounds through it and come across a jam, And again, it's who's firing the weapon. It's more than likely who's maintaining the weapon and the conditions it's kept in. But generally, for the most part, a revolver is a lot more reliable than a semi-auto, like your Glocks and your SIGs and your Smith & Wessons and all that good stuff, purely because of its design. It's pretty foolproof, isn't it? It's a bit like the old fucking Mardouse, you know what I mean? The old 50 cal. It's pretty much a tried and tested design. Why fix it if it's not broken?
Right. Well, the one thing I'll say about, and I'm not trying to get into a dick measuring contest on also Glock, MMPs, all that shit. But I do have a Glock 19 I've had since 1988. That's a fact. Had it while I was in the Marine Corps and LTI'd it, and, it is what it is. Here's the point. I put over 1 million rounds through the barrel that I have, which I have, and I've always talked about it. I blew, after 1 million rounds, or close to, is where I started noticing a lack of accuracy. But basically, I made it smooth bore, just firing. And a lot of it's my fault. I was shooting the rounds we had for our MP5s They were Hurtenberger rounds, and they were plus P. And I shot, I can't tell you how many shitloads of rounds I fired out of that. And I made it smoothbore, over time. And the accuracy suffered. I got a new barrel for it. I had to, because the other barrel, I still have it in my museum. Some guy one time said, "Your museum is, you don't have no museum." Yeah, it's my Conex box, bitch. The point is, the damn thing's now accurate again. But I also know the limitations of a semi-auto. If somebody takes it out of cycle, which means they only move it a little bit, and you decide you want to pull the trigger, it's not going to fire. A revolver, I have to put my hand over the revolver, or put my thumb over where the hammer's dropping, whether it's got a thumb hold to pull it back, or whether it's bobtail. Those are the only two ways I can stop that revolver from shooting. And that makes me reach further. Whereas a semi-auto, if I grab it, push it back an eighth of an inch, you ain't shooting it all day long. You can squeeze that trigger as long as I hold that damn thing with some tautness. And if I got a hold of it like that, it's not pointing towards my bodice. So you're going to put them in the ground or up in the air, whatever.
Yeah, it's again, it comes down to what the guns are used for. It's all right pulling out a Glock SIG, it's a semi-auto, when a target's 30, 40 feet away. And that's why a lot of the revolvers, like your 38 specials and all that good stuff like that, are what's called guns, because they're generally guns where your semi-autos, either you've been disarmed, or it's wrestled from you, or it's jammed. You've got either the target's close range, or the target's on top of you. You're fighting for your life, and you can reach down to a sock or something like that, where you can pistol out, press it against the target into the
Reload.
The soft parts. Yeah, you can stick it into an armpit, into the side of the ribs, into the sort of side, between the legs, against the neck, against the head, without having to worry that it's not going to cycle because you've taken it out of. You know what I mean? It's going to function because it's you know what I mean, the top slide's being pushed back, so it's not going to fire.
Right, it's
you know
taken
what I mean?
out of battery. It's taken out of battery.
It's very simple tool. It's point and click. You can press it against something and make a mess, where you can't really do that with a semi-auto. So again, that's an argument that again is falls in favour of a wheel gun, a revolver, whatever you want to call them. Just a point. Obviously, revolvers over here are a lot more favoured, purely because of our gun laws. It's very, very hard to get hold of a pistol. Where, sounds crazy, you can't, even though I couldn't legally go out now and buy a Glock 19 Gen 3 in 9mm in 4 or whatever I wanted it to be in, but I can go out and buy a 44, you know what I mean, Super Taurus, or the old 44 Magnum, any caliber handgun I want, up to 50 caliber, you know what I mean. Legally, I can do that, so that's why they're favoured over here a lot more, just because of legal reasons. But then it comes back onto what we'll come back onto like the old caliber, the debate of 45 versus 9mm, and then it can go to everything else. It can go to 10mm, it can go to 5.7, and all the sort of bespoke calibers. But generally, it's that old 55 versus 9mm, and it comes down to individuals at the end of the day. It comes down to individuals, and then you go on.
And their training time. I mean, if you're going to use a gun, have the training time with it. The retention, that's the biggest thing I always tell people. Retention of your firearm, number one. Because anybody can grab for it, even if you're carrying hidden. You've made a point of that on one of the videos I believe we've done. Retention is key. That means nobody else can grab it from you. You know how to counter any grabs. Also, knowing what you're going up against. Like you said, you can fire point blank with a Glock unless you push it in. Let's say it's winter. That thick clothing can push it back that little eighth of an inch that it will not function. Same with an MMP. And it's about knowing what you're doing. And, you know, like I said, with the 10 millimeter, that will take down a grizzly. But so will the 357, so will a 44. Do you want a grizzly fight? Let's say one runs out of the fucking woods at you in Alaska or somewhere, you know, somewhere where bears are common. Not just a grizzly, it could be whatever bear. Do you want that 10 millimeter that could get into the fur by the time that damn thing's on you and you're going to be freaked out for a second and you're firing point blank? Do you want that fur to push that back and make it out of battery as it eats your ass? And that's how they do it. They eat you from the asshole in. That's just a fact. And they may maul you, but when they decide to start eating you, you might still be alive as they start eating you from the asshole up.
Is that why they call me the grizzly?
Yeah, maybe. But that's the whole point of it. It's such a ridiculous conversation because, look, with the modern ammunition we have the critical duty, which the FBI says the wound tunnel mushrooms out to a 45 from a 9 millimeter bullet, right? And it will kill and give a wound channel the same size faster, but the stopping power argument's even more retarded because, look, as long as it's not a ball ammunition, which is what all militaries demand you use, ball ammunition can go through and through. That's a fact. Rifle or pistol. And that just makes a bleeding channel. It doesn't make a wound channel. And that's the wound channel is the stopping power. And 45, if it's ball, people say, well, it hits slower and it goes through small. It's Jeff Cooper stuff, which I'm not hating on Jeff. Jeff's the guru. I'm not, and I'm not an expert on anything. But I've never had a bad guy step away from something I've had to do. I've hurt a few feelings in my life, as I know you have too. You know, most people who listen have never had to do this. So I guess they're just taking my word for granted. But it's a fact. If you have something, before there was critical duty, I was a big advocate years before with 2 other rounds. One was hydroshock. There was a problem with the way the pins were and mushrooming of the bullet. Then Black Talon, which quickly got berated because, it cuts like a jigsaw going through the body. No, it's making a wound channel. And then they went to Golden Saber. They just changed the title. It's the same goddamn round. But, you know, nobody wants to talk about this. The ammunition choice is key. And honestly, if I'm out there in the Southwest, I want to have some snake shot, some buckshot rounds. Well, they make them for 9 millimeter. They're fine, but they're not as good as coming out of a revolver. And to be able to, if you know that you have snake shot in your first 2 tubes out of your other 6 rounds and something's coming at you, and all you have to do as you draw, pull back the tang of that daggone revolver's hammer to where it spins a little bit, even in a panic, you may pass up that first round, but you at least got 3 shots to put on target to something that maybe mountain lion, it could be a moose. It could be whatever, but it's in a caliber that can drop that target and also have that bullet style of not being ball, where you're going to drop that animal and it's not going to kill you. There was a famous video, I think you remember it from back in the day, where a hunter with a rifle got jammed up by a bull moose, and he carried him through the town of Maine, some town in Maine. And here's this guy, his rifle still slung across his back. He's in the horns of this moose. He's dead. So what do you want to do, right? And go on and talk, but did you find any lack of soundness in my thought?
No, certainly not, mate. Certainly not. And again, the old adage and the old argument of I'd rather, if I'm hitting something, I want to be putting it down and all that. And again, it's like, so what threats are you going to be coming up against? If you live, like you said, somewhere like the Southwest, or you live sort of like the Rockies or Alaska, like that, where the chances of you coming across an armed assailant are a lot less than you coming across a fucking angry bear or an angry moose or a fucking mountain lion, cougar or something like that. And then that's going to dictate what type of fucking round you carry, what, you know what I mean? So personally, it's shot placement, and you get a lot more shots with a semi-auto 9mm than you generally do with a 45. That's just the way that, unless you've got a really big fucking hand cannon that's carrying 15 fucking rounds or whatever. So generally you do get a semi-auto in 9mm that carries more rounds. That to me tells me that if you're not as a good shot, more rounds would make sense rather than the stopping power, because it's going to take you longer to hit the target. And if you're carrying a 1911, I think what do they carry, between 7 and 9 rounds generally?
Well, they have the extended 15-round mags, but the point is, I guess the greater point is, with the new advent of critical duty, critical defense is slightly less than, but it makes a 45 wound channel, so the stopping power argument's pretty much moot just by bullet design. It's the best I found, and the FBI tested it, and I talked about this on that thread. I was like, look, 22 caliber, .22 caliber, long rifle. It drops every year, whether it's pistol or rifle, kills more people in the U.S. than any other round. It's because of choice of round. And that's by FBI statistics, by the way. And in my state of Ohio, the largest gun used to kill more deer, which, remember, that's a 200-pound plus animal, is by, let me rephrase this, by poachers, is the 1022, which shoots a 22 long rifle round. It's about shot placement. You had it absolutely correct. How do you shoot? Even under stress. And few people will test themselves under stress. And a lot of trainers negate stress testing. And that's kind of the point of what we're talking about right now, brother, because I think you understand this more than most.
Yeah, on that subject of the old 2.2 and a lot more people being killed by it. Again, it's generally through not sort of nefarious acts. It's through the mishandling of weapons or things like that. I think what it is as well, because it's such a small caliber, it doesn't sort of obviously military or law enforcement. You're always taught, or anybody who's with firearms is always taught you respect any caliber, but again, because it's such a small caliber, sometimes it doesn't garner that respect it deserves because it's such a small caliber, and a lot of the times, unfortunately, to very unfortunate circumstances, people put in fucking caliber up through the bottom of the chin and through the top of the mouth because they've mishandled a weapon, if you know what I mean.
No, I get what you're saying for suicides and stuff. No, I'm talking about legit homicides. And also poaching of deer. Those are both criminal acts. the point I'm mentioning is it's about shot placement. Like you said, under the chin, through the head, right? We can't negate the shock factor either. I mean, look, there's people, and this is, one of the things I teach and you teach is blade awareness. Somebody carrying a knife. There are a legion of cop stories that said, "Oh, I could handle a gunshot, but if somebody came at me with a knife, I hope I can handle that, and I could kill them with my bullet before they get to you." You're not going to be able to do that. Dan Isanto proved that in a video called, I used to use it all the time in training. Beware the knife
21 feet.
Knife wielder.
Yeah.
And it was early. I believe that was early. I think no, I take that back. I believe that was late 80s. It's dated. It might be early 90s. Please buy that and watch it. There's a guy that got cut in his forearm, the bottom where the meat is. He didn't bleed to death. He died from shock. And 22 is the same thing. There's cops and people that say, I could handle a knife, but not a bullet, and they just give up. It's about your will to survive and about what you want to say. I really want to hear, but these little dictums are always true. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I get it. It's probably something that we're going to touch on more in a later show. Is offensive and defensive sort of actions with a knife. And again, shot placement doesn't really come into it when someone's getting a knife, because if you think when you're pulling a firearm on something, regardless of your fucking caliber, you're always trying to do it at a distance. You're always trying to keep distance between you and your target, whether it's a wild animal, whether it's an assailant, whether if you're a nefarious motherfucker and you're holding up a bank, you're always trying to put distance between you and your target, and that is the sole purpose of a firearm. Is you can either offensively or defensively attack a target from distance. Where someone's carrying a knife, they don't have that distance. So they're going to be as low-key as possible until they're within striking distance of you, as close as possible, because that's where it's more devastating. That's where their positivities outweigh your positivities, because getting a firearm out of a holster or out of a fucking pocket or wherever, it's going to take a lot longer than it is for someone to pull a knife and fucking 3 or 4 strikes in vital areas or non-vital areas, it doesn't matter, to dispatch you. And chances are that's being done before you even laid your hand on your fucking pistol butt or located your weapon. So again, and the reason why I said 21 feet earlier, because they say that is the sort of like the critical sort of distance it takes for someone to pull a knife, to start advancing towards you, and to start stabbing you before you've even got your pistol out on target and release the first shot. They say it's the time it takes to someone cover 21 feet with a knife to attack you. So again, it comes down to shot placement. That first round needs to count, and again, that may be where the old adage of stopping power. Let's say we're just talking about normal rounds. We aren't talking about the civil duty rounds or anything like that. That's why it might be, and people have got it in the head, I need that first shot to count. But then we can go down the old training argument is, now you're under pressure. You know what I mean? You're under pressure. Your life's at stake. You need to pull that pistol out and shoot accurately to make that first round count. Now, fucking thank God that you look at the situation that they had down in Texas not so long ago, only a couple of weeks ago, where the retired FBI agent pulled out his firearm and drilled that fucking fool through the face. In the church, or things would have gone a lot different, And again, that goes towards the argument of why firearms are a good thing. You put them in the hand of a good guy, they're going to stop a bad guy, Again, that's an argument we've had a lot of times over this past few over the number of shows that we've done, that a firearm in the hands of a good guy will always be better than firearms in the arms of a bad guy. And again, you can see that retired FBI agent of time on the range, operational experience is priceless. Because at the end of the day, he stopped a mass shooter, and I shot him through the face, and it goes to that. But how many people can do that when there's someone advancing on them with a knife or a gun? Is pull that pistol out and fire that first round and hit them where it counts. And again, it might be the type of round that you're firing. That might make the difference. The type of handgun you're firing, that's going to make the difference. But it all comes down to training. So again, it's a moot point when it's all this stopping power and all that good stuff. It goes in the realms of war porn and the old, yeah, but I'll do this and I'll do this, I'll do this. You don't know what you're going to do until it happens, So
until you have to deal with it, and that's the old thing. I hate to say this, it's about experience and training, past experience and training. Before that experience, look, we're both old guys in a game where most people die young. One thing I can tell you, and you can verify it when I'm done, or call bullshit on me. Inside a house with no ear pro on, or even if you have the ear pro that shut down the sound once you shoot, but amplify it before then, when somebody shoots in a house, it's omnidirectional. You really don't know where that round's coming from. And you don't know who and where they're at. And that's what's so unique with that FBI agent at the church. He heard the shot. He had some experience, honestly. He had to have. And he was able to say, okay, here it is. He got 5 to 8 seconds, depending on how you're looking at the video, to take that good shot. And that's the crux of it. And I'm sure we'll never know the load. These dudes that'll say, I use this gun like they're deer hunting. I use this bullet, and I killed the deer at this range. Well, they had all the time in the world. You're dealing with human beings. The first time that person shoots, his hearing's gone unless he's wearing ear pro. The only one I've seen is the guy down there in Texas who put on earphones to cut the noise. And honestly, that guy's, once you shoot, you and I both know this, until you've had a couple of shootings, you go linear. You are looking at your target. You're looking like you're driving at high speed. You have this tunnel vision. And so your peripheral, you'd think that guy, if you look at the Texas church shooting, you think that guy would have seen that guy. That guy was right there. And you would think he'd see him in the peripheral and aim up on him. He's not going to. And the reason why, he didn't have that experience of shooting indoors. And I'm not talking about the shooter with the headphones on. I'm talking about the church shooter, brother, not the mall shooter. So he was already tunnel visioned on who he wanted to shoot. And that guy had all the time in the world to go, okay, motherfucker, and you're down now. And remember, other people pulled their guns, but they saw the threat was negated. And it wasn't this Wild West shit that the neo-progs keep wanting to push. It's not real. That's not what people do. But training is key on anything. If you're using a revolver, if you're using a semi, a rifle, a shotgun, I don't give a fuck what weapon system you're using, or even a knife. Train with what you have, not what you wish you had. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I just said, brother.
Yeah, and I think what you've got to do as well is also an adage to that is truly realistically. If you're Joe Average, you get up, you take the kids to school, you go and do some grocery shopping, you go and put petrol in or fuel in your car, you go home, you do some DIY, you go and pick the kids up. You're just an everyday, average Joe kind of guy. Do you need to be cutting around Chris Costa's school of fucking shooting, do C-clamps and taking shots and fucking looking around you and do tack reloads? Let's fucking get real. I've never, ever seen anybody employ those tactics outside of either a range or in places like Afghanistan, where tack reloads are going and you're going through compound doors, yada, yada, yada. You know what I mean? It's very rare that you're doing all this fucking fancy YouTube bullshit where it shows that a retired FBI agent with good situational awareness, with fucking hours and hours and hours of training on the range and operationally, a well-maintained firearm, managed to correct shot placement and seal that situation quite fucking quickly through the adaptation of what he knows and all that good stuff. You need to him in doing fucking Chris Costa pulling the pistol back into the chest and looking around and doing tack reloads and all that, because that's what he did. So all these schools of shooting, unless you're going to be working in that line of work, are fucking bullshit. Get yourself down to a range, get some fucking shot, and look at the shot placement.
It's all tactical theatrics. Honestly,
yeah, it's war, like you said, it's war porn. It's war porn. Guys wanting to walk around in cry kit all day long with AR-10s over their shoulders, looking cool with Oakley shades on, hoping someone stands out in front of them so they can do tack reload, Chris Costa C-grip, fucking shooting, fucking pistol punching out to the front, yada, 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 bollocks. You know, in reality, you start doing shit like that, you're going to get your fucking self drilled, aren't you? Enough said about that.
Well, unless you've actually trained on it. And I remember, here's the funny thing, and I think we may have talked on this. We may not have, but I think we did, maybe offline, if not on a show. I remember when Tac was, and this is back in 85, brother. Drop your ass, grab the pistol with both hands, and mostly it was revolvers. I think Smith & Wessons, and I have one, a 5906. Well, I had one until the boating accident. 5906, that you would drop your ass, fire, and bring it back to you, and you would assess, looking left and right. That's range theatrics, okay? Behind you, right? I understand the theory of that. And the theory is you're looking to see who's coming. The reality of it is, if I'm moving my head, if I think there may be somebody to the left, to the right, or behind me, that gun is moving with my eyes. And if you're not training that way, you're training to die. Because I look certainly behind me, I now have a lag time in the OTA loop, and that's a big problem I see with modern training today. But see, on a range, you can't do that unless you put, let's say, you have a target of 2 rounds, and you trust everybody going down range. They've only put 2 rounds in their mag or in their revolver, and they fire, bang, bang. And you know those rounds are gone. There's no other rounds in it, and it depends on the instructor. And so they sweep left, right, and over the back. That's the only way you can actually properly train to break that tunnel vision. And anybody else who says that's not the way, okay, you got tunnel vision, baby.
Yeah. Basically, it comes down to you think of your basic soldiering. I remember, and I was teaching it until I got out. And it could, like, say, when you're on patrol, when you're turning your head, the rifle goes with, because you're Indeed. On patrol, you're walking down somewhere, you look to your right, and there's a fucking machine gun nest, or there's a fucking an enemy assailant there, led with a rifle pointing at you. Now it's a Mexican standoff. It's can get a weapon on target and squeeze the trigger faster than the person. And if he's pointing at you and you've turned your head, you're automatically at disadvantage, because now your weapon generally is either 90 degrees or 180 degrees. And the other way, if you're looking to your right, generally people carry a rifle slung across the body from fucking butt in the right shoulder, you know what I mean, across the chest. So if you're looking to your right, your barrel tends to be pointing down and to the left. So straight away, you've got half a second, 3/4 of a second in lag before your weapon's even pointed anywhere near a target. You know what I mean? So
and you'll
again,
be smoked.
all this rounds and all that. If you're fucking looking around and your pistol's not going where your eyes are going, it's a pointless fucking venture. You know, yes, you might be looking around you, but what are you going to do about it? The gunman there, chances are he's just seen you fucking snap 2 rounds into his friend. He's now turned towards you with his AK, his shotgun, his rifle, his pistol, whatever, and now it's like, okay, quick draw, my friend. You're going to fucking lose that battle. So again, it's how you do that training. And thankfully, your retired FBI agent was switched on enough to know that okay, he's got a shooter again, and it comes down to it. You can do all this Chris Costa training you want with the grips and the fucking tack reloads, flipping mags out to the side. Chances are, when bullets are slamming into your position, you're seeing and hearing bullets hit flesh and people screaming and dying. All that goes out the fucking window unless you've had real life experience of it or put in hundreds of thousands of hours where it becomes muscle memory. A 2-week course down at fucking Costa Luda isn't fucking doing that, I'm afraid. You know what I mean? Once a month down at the range looking cool with all your crikey on, fucking trying to hit on all the single fucking soccer mums who are there just for a pistol class. You know what I mean? It's not going to do much good.
Yeah, but you might but you might get some pussy from them soccer moms if you're wearing that 511 tux or the cry kit. You know, that's the bullshit of this. Is everybody who's a trainer, not everybody, I take that back. There's a few trainers that I've worked with that understand it. The problem is with some of the ranges, and I mean this, they don't hold, and one of the instructors that I'll talk about, I'm not going to say his name, but he's a good instructor. I wish I could say his name, but he didn't give me permission. And I worked for him. This man and his wife are both trainers, and they're awesome people. And they know that the breaking your tunnel vision, the left, right, and over the back shoot is useless if you're not moving your gun. The problem is most ranges will not respect somebody to say, okay, load 2 rounds. We're going to shoot 2 rounds into the target, and we're going to do a proper sweep. And I cannot fault them for that because that's what the insurance is for. The insurance dictates it to the range and to the people training. And it's not until you go overseas, honestly, into some shithole countries, or you're out there with your boys, and all your boys know this is what we're doing, and they're walking you through it. Honestly, you're not going to get that kind of training. And I don't think you can in the U.S., and I definitely don't think you can in the U.K. And your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the chances are, I mean, again, the range templates will only dictate that you put rounds in one direction. And obviously then the chance, usually range templates are in a sort of a fan sort of shape. You know what I mean? For shooting and ricochets and things like that. They're generally not a big circle where rounds can go in any direction, again, because of insurances, for safety, because if you have that, it's going to be a free-for-all and people are going to get shot. It's usually generally like the military ranges, and again, even military ranges sit in the same sort of configuration as civilian ranges, unless it's a free fire range where it's just one big open area. But again, there's still templates going in. But for training circumstances, where they will put things like that, it's highly governed. There's usually hardened buildings or facilities where people are put in, so there is no fuckery and people getting shot.
Houses, right?
But again, and going back to what I was saying, it sounds like I'm hating on fucking Chris Costa. I'm not. It's just I'm using that as a demonstration. That guy can shoot. He's got the cool beard, looks the part. But again, a lot of what he teaches does have some real life application. But if you're in that line of work, if you're naval special warfare, if you're an OD, if you're DEA, FBI, ATF, SWAT,
By the way,
Special
Chris
Forces,
Costa
kicking
was
doors
Coast
in.
Guard. He wasn't
Yeah, he
Naval
was Coast
Special
Guard. He was
Warfare.
Coast Guard.
Yeah, he does the Costa
Yeah.
Villanueva. No, the point that I'm saying is, if you have instructors that are actually watching everybody load their mags, we know there's 2 rounds. Go take your target, 2 rounds, or 3 rounds even, to the chest, 1 to the head. Okay, let's say the common drill we have, vest check, right?
Yeah.
And you know every bullet went down range. Anybody can fire a ceasefire or call a ceasefire. So you know all 3 rounds or 2 rounds have went down range. When they do their check, if there was a misfire, whatever, anybody can say ceasefire, which means nobody will move. At that point, but it takes enough instructors to do that. And I've seen it done numerous times in my evolution as a trainer, and also, as a guy going down range to train. The Soldier of Fortune 3-gun matches was probably the best learning ground for me. And it's because you had many people coming down there and shooting and sharing their training styles. I mean, Rhodesia was still a state back then, bruh. Or no, actually it wasn't a state. It actually got co-opted. But the South Africans that showed up were former Rhodesian soldiers. And it was all about the hits. It was all about doing what you're doing and knowing what you had in your barrel. And that meant you went down range for the different courses. And it wasn't dump them in a barrel, grab them off a fucking table. The NRA fucked everything up in the U.S. And I don't want to hate on the NRA because at least they're doing it. Okay? But it was probably done the best by Soldier of Fortune back in Vegas, back in the day. And like I said, everybody knows I competed in several of their courses. R.K. Brown was a pioneer, and I think that kind of training is going to have to come back probably pretty soon now that we've put a certain person into the ether. And your thoughts?
Yeah, again, because of what's going on, there is a heightened threat, in let's say the domestic environment, where brandishing semi-auto rifles in high streets doesn't really fucking come into the equation. It's going to be close range pistol, small arms, very, very low exposure engagements, but to the standard where, if you look at what happened in London recently with the fucking guy on London Bridge, and you had that dude with a narwhal tusk, the police,
nice
and I would dare say yours will be the same. Certainly, it's good to see that our police, I would dare say, are certainly leading the way when it comes to potential suicide bombers. There is no hesitation. If you've not seen the video, people are listening, just look at the actions that the coppers took on London Bridge. A guy wrestled the floor. There was a guy with a fucking narwhal tusk. How cool was he? And a guy with a fire extinguisher. Let's get all that. Oh, well, if they had guns, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Put that on the streets of New York. How many people carry guns on the streets of New York, apart from the naughty boys or the police, or Chicago or Los Angeles? You know what I mean? There's not many people carrying firearms in certain places.
Or the rare concealed carrier, which, unless they're cops or police, Anthony, I can't think of his name, from Opie and Anthony, has a concealed carry permit. But they're constantly trying to take away people's concealed carry permits. And that's a problem with one side of the argument. And I don't want to get into a debate on that. But you guys in England, your police are trained to a certain standard. If they're carrying guns, and I've met several of those people, and I know you've met more than I have. We did a show one time where you talked about it. That's a different situation. And anyways, it's almost retarded. It's about shot placement. Mark Lonsdale, I went through STTU with him, and I knew Alan Brosnan from it was explosives entry technician school, TEAS, Tactical Explosive Entry School. Those are people that brought knowledge from South Africa and Rhodesia. I don't even know if they're still alive. Respect them both. A lot of people will say this, that, and the other, but they've never met the men. They didn't claim anything they weren't. I'll never forget meeting a Frank County Sheriff's deputy who I was talking to a brother of mine, my mentor actually, and I was telling him the plight of me trying to set up a tea school. Alan and I knew each other, and I was one of the few people that knew that in the U.S., right? Here's the fucked up part. Attorney General's office said, well, you're not a cop. How you can teach cops? Well, I did it in California. See how that works? And now California, I don't think he can do it. Now, since he couldn't do it here, he did it in Tennessee for a while. And he went down to South America. Kind of interesting, isn't it? That now, probably the premier tea school, I don't even know if he's still alive or if he's still working, but he had to set up in South America to do a realistic school on something that's, you and I both now look back on it as, that's old hat. Dude, I was breaking, and everybody else in my Marine Corps organization, my MP school, we were breaking new shit. And it's just like they don't want to look at it. And I know the Brits always have. You guys have always been on the forefront. But anyways, without going too deep in it, it just boggles my mind how, Jesus Christ, we change subjects. Sorry about that, man. I fucked that all up.
Oh, don't worry about it, mate. It's all good. It's all the good digression.
Well, run on with, I want you to close it out and give your opinion, and I'm going to mute myself, and we'll just talk offline after we're done.
Yeah. So I think the original subject of this caliber debate, pistol versus semi-auto versus revolver debate, it comes down to the individual. But that is also going to be dictated to the situation you're in. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's all chemistry and physics. You know what I mean? Chemistry, physics, and biology, because that's all that matters at the end of the day. Is if you're squeezing the trigger, that is biology and physics, electrical impulses, and then it turns to mechanical physics. That hammer hits the firing pin, then it turns to chemistry, solids into gases. And then physics take over, which ends in biology, the actual thing that thing hits. So it's all about science, and we are dictated to by mathematics and science, the situation you're in. But that can be influenced by the amount that you train, or if you are lucky enough or unlucky enough, however you look at it, to have operational experience in situations like that. It'll dictate how successful you are at deploying that weapon system, that tool, and you're the one left standing at the end of the day. And whatever you've pointed that tool at and engaged isn't, or is at least neutralised. All the cool schools and the cool gear, the fucking shades and the back wall caps and your tactical speed loaders, there's not many times that you're going to be in a situation where you fire more than 4 or 5 rounds. So why spend 2 weeks down at Costa Luda learning cool mag flip tack reloads? I'd rather spend that time on a range, perfecting shot placement, grouping, and actually get into your weapon system quickly, because that's again, it's somewhere where you can digress. There's certain subjects or sort of certain chapters of this story, and I think what to summarise, obviously, one, it's the choice of firearm. You to suit yourself, to suit your stature. No point if you're a 19-year-old girl who's quite slim, carrying a fucking 50 AE Desert Eagle. It's not gonna, be conducive to you being effective. Then how you carry that weapon system, whether it's open carry, whether it's concealed carry, but it needs to be a carry that you can get to quickly, and it's not going to snag on clothing, it's not going to snag against working parts of the pistol. And then from there, it's just practice. One, locating the firearm. Two, drawing the firearm in whatever state it's in, whether it's loaded, mid, ready, whether there's one in the chamber where you have to cock the weapon system or pull the hammer back, whatever, and doing that. And that's what you need to practice before you even start putting rounds down target. We all want to watch the thing go bang and see the little holes appearing in the target, but what you need to do before that is making sure that you can draw that pistol, draw that revolver, that weapon system quickly, accurately, and get it onto target with your eyes closed, and then open your eyes and see where that stands and start working those muscles, that muscle memory, so you can locate, draw, punch, squeeze the trigger, all within a reasonable amount of time. Once you can do that and you're happy with that, and you can do that pretty much by muscle memory, then it's time to put, weight in the pistol and start putting rounds down range. And then after that, you can look as cool as you want, with your Costa Luda fucking head turns and your tack reloads and all that good stuff. It's down to the individual, mate. I think I've droned on long enough about that. I'll let you close it out, brother. It's been a pleasure to be back online on Chuff's Orange Couch, and I'm sure that we'll get another one done soon.
Oh yeah. My point is, you're exactly right. Smooth is fast. Train the muscle memory. It will go always to where it needs to go, whether it's a knife or a gun, and know where you place your shit. Develop that muscle memory. That's the point of this whole thing, is a reality check. And as Baz stated, it is about getting it out, and adrenaline's going to be a bitch enough. When you're pulling that gun without muscle memory, you're pulling something that you may not know where it's at. Consistency with your draw, consistency with your aim, consistency with everything you do. And hopefully you're not in a bad headspace when that time happens and you mind dump it. That's a fact. And with that being said, we will expand on this in future shows. Baz, thank you for coming on. We've had an epic conversation, and I will slowly raise the drawbridge of Kaiser's Castle, so you guys can all slowly meander out, finish your coffee, tea, soda, or adult libation. And I mean this more than ever, especially on this show. Know where your information's coming from, and guys, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe Baz. Research it, do your own thoughts, go out there. If somebody says they're an expert, we're not experts. We just have done this in the field and seen a lot of different eras. And I wish you guys all good luck, and gals, if you ever have to defend yourself. Remember, shut your mouths, get a lawyer, hopefully you have good insurance, because you will be sued if you ever have to deploy. that horrible defense that you have to. Because it is real. You're ending a life to save yours or somebody you love. And that's really all I have to say. And we will talk on this later, but remember, a gun's nothing more than a tool. And use it wisely and teach your children to use it wisely. And hopefully they will continue that thought process. Thank you for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. And I believe me and Baz are out as you meander off my big orange couch with your coffee, tea, soda, and adult libation. I will raise the drawbridge now. God bless, be well, be safe. Shove out.